Hashtag Part 1. Marcus Chun adjusted his scope one final time, watching the alien patrol move through the crystalline forests of Kepler 442b. The purple leaf trees provided perfect cover, their bioluminescent veins pulsing in rhythm with the planet's magnetic field. 3 clicks away, his target moved with mechanical precision. A Vorthan war commander whose tactical brilliance had cost humanity 12 colonies in the past year. The communication device in his ear crackled to life just as his finger found the trigger. All human forces, this is Admiral Morrison. Effective immediately, a galaxy-wide ceasefire has been declared. The Galactic Council has established this sector as a no-fire zone pending peace negotiations. Repeat, all hostilities are to cease immediately. Marcus paused, his breath forming small clouds in the frigid alien air. Around him, the forest hummed with otherworldly sounds. Chittering insects that looked like flying jewels, and the distant calls of creatures that had never known Earth's sun. The ceasefire order echoed through his earpiece again, but his eyes remained fixed on the target below. Commander Zethkar of the Vorthan Empire moved through the clearing with 4 bodyguards, their energy weapons gleaming in the pale light of 3 moons. This was the alien who had orchestrated the destruction of New Geneva, where Marcus had lost his sister and her family. The same commander who had developed the human-breaking torture techniques that violated every known law of warfare. The tactical computer on his wrist displayed incoming messages from his squad leader, his battalion commander, and, finally, from Central Command itself. All carried the same message: stand down, return to base, honor the ceasefire. Marcus read each one and systematically deleted them. Hashtag Part 2. The shot echoed across the crystalline forest like thunder. Zethkar stumbled, his 4 arms reaching toward the smoking hole in his chest armor, before collapsing among the glowing fungi that carpeted the clearing floor. His bodyguards immediately took defensive positions, their energy weapons scanning for threats while one attended to their fallen commander. Marcus was already moving. The moment the bullet left his rifle, he had rolled away from his position and begun his escape route through the maze of purple crystal trees. Behind him, he could hear the distinctive whine of Vorthan energy weapons as they fired blindly into the forest, their beams turning patches of alien wood into superheated plasma. His earpiece, though switched off, buzzed insistently against his collar. Marcus knew what those messages contained: demands for his immediate surrender, orders to return to base for court-martial, and probably threats of execution for violating direct orders. The human command structure worked on discipline and hierarchy. What they didn't understand was that some things transcended those structures. 3 hours later, Marcus reached his hidden supply cache in a cave system carved into the planet's unique mineral formations. The caverns glowed with natural phosphorescence, creating an otherworldly cathedral of blue and green light. He activated a small communication device, not military issue, but something he had acquired through less official channels. The holographic image that appeared was that of Captain Elena Vasquez, formerly of the 3rd Marine Reconnaissance Battalion, now technically listed as missing in action. Like Marcus, she had personal reasons to continue the fight despite official orders. "Chun, you magnificent bastard," Elena's image smiled grimly. "The entire sector is going crazy looking for whoever took out Zethkar. The Vorthans are screaming for blood, and our own command wants a hand over the shooter to preserve the ceasefire." Marcus set down his rifle and began cleaning it with practiced efficiency. "How much time do we have?" "Maybe 6 hours before they triangulate your position. The Vorthans are bringing in their best trackers, and our people are cooperating to find you." Elena's expression grew serious. "Marcus, you need to know, they're calling this an act of terrorism. Both sides want your head." "Good," Marcus replied, checking his ammunition supply. "Let them be angry. Anger makes people sloppy." Elena leaned forward, her hologram flickering slightly. "There's more. Intelligence suggests the Vorthans were planning something big for after the ceasefire. Zethkar wasn't just a military commander. He was coordinating with other species, building a coalition. Your shot might have done more than just get revenge." Marcus looked up from his equipment. Throughout the galaxy, humanity was considered a minor power, young, aggressive, but ultimately limited by their single-system origin. Most alien species have been spacefaring for millennia before humans learned to make fire. The Galactic Council treated human representatives with polite condescension, like adults humoring children at a diplomatic dinner. But humans had advantages that older species had forgotten or never possessed. They adapted quickly, learned from every defeat, and carried grudges across generations. Most importantly, they understood something about warfare that the galaxy's more civilized races had forgotten. Sometimes the only way to ensure peace was to make war too costly to continue. What kind of coalition? Marcus asked. 3 major powers, possibly 4. The Vorthans, the Crystalline Hegemony, the Void Swimmers, and maybe the Architect Collective. All species that see humanity as a threat to be eliminated before we become too powerful. Elena's image gestured to something off-screen. Zethkar was the architect of this alliance. Without him, their coordination falls apart. Marcus understood the implications. The ceasefire wasn't a peace agreement. It was a trap. Give humanity time to relax their guard. Then strike with overwhelming force from multiple directions. The Galactic Council probably knew, but preferred a quick, clean genocide to a prolonged war that might disrupt trade routes. A sound echoed through the cave system, the distant hum of alien aircraft. Marcus began packing his gear with mechanical precision. Elena, I need you to do something for me. Name it. Contact the other ghosts. Anyone who's gone dark since the ceasefire. Marcus knew there were others like him and Elena, soldiers who had lost too much to simply stop fighting because politicians demanded it. Tell them what you told me about the coalition. Elena nodded. And then? Marcus shouldered his equipment pack and moved toward the cave's rear exit. Then, we give the galaxy a demonstration of what humans do best, which is hunt. The aircraft sounds are getting closer. Marcus could distinguish at least 3 different engine types: Vorthan pursuit craft, human dropships, and something else with the distinctive harmonic frequency of crystalline hegemony technology. The joint task force hunting him represented the new reality. Former enemies working together to eliminate the human who had disrupted their carefully orchestrated peace. As Marcus emerged from the cave system onto a windswept plateau, he activated a small device attached to his belt. The signal it broadcast was simple and short, but it would be picked up by every piece of human communication equipment in the sector. The message was even simpler. The hunt continues. Behind him, the cave entrance exploded as energy weapons fired into it. His pursuers would find nothing but empty rock and the lingering scent of human determination. By the time they realized he had escaped, Marcus would be 3 systems away, gathering intelligence on the next target. The ceasefire had been declared, but Marcus Chun had already started a different kind of war, one that wouldn't end with treaties or negotiations, but only when humanity's enemies understood that some species were too dangerous to hunt. Part 3 weeks after Zethkar's death, the second target fell on Rigel Prime. Commander Thexera of the Crystalline Hegemony had been coordinating supply lines for the planned coalition strike against Earth. She died in what appeared to be a mining accident. A crystalline formation collapse that crushed her and her entire planning staff. The accident occurred exactly when the formations were naturally strongest, which made it impossible according to hegemony physics. Marcus watched the news coverage from a crowded spaceport on Tau Ceti Station. The reporter, a nervous-looking human journalist, struggled to explain how such a precisely timed accident could occur. Behind him, hegemony investigators moved through the wreckage with their characteristic fluid motions, their silicon-based bodies shifting to navigate the debris. Sabotage is suspected, but cannot be proven, the reporter continued. The crystalline hegemony has demanded that human authorities surrender any individuals with mining or demolitions expertise for questioning. The Galactic Council has agreed to cooperate fully with this investigation. Marcus sipped synthetic coffee and continued watching. The reporter didn't mention that Thexera had been the architect of the Crystal Maze torture technique used on captured human prisoners. The technique involves slowly encasing victims in growing crystal formations, keeping them alive, but paralyzed while extracting information through neural interfaces. 300 human prisoners had died that way before Marcus located the commander's base. His earpiece buzzed with an encrypted message from Elena. Ghost Network confirms. for more coalition leaders eliminated. The Void Swimmers lost their fleet coordinator in an airlock malfunction. The Architect Collective strategic planner suffered a fatal logic paradox that fried his quantum brain. Someone named Davidson took out a secondary Vorthan commander with a bomb disguised as a peace offering. Marcus smiled grimly. Davidson had been a demolitions expert on New Geneva. His wife and children had been among Zethkar's victims. Apparently, the man had decided that grief was a luxury he couldn't afford until every architect of humanity's planned genocide was dead. The spaceport's announcement system crackled to life in multiple languages. Attention passengers. Due to increased security measures, all travelers must submit to enhanced scanning procedures. The Galactic Council reminds all citizens that harboring fugitive humans is considered an act of terrorism and will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of galactic law. Around the terminal, aliens of various species moved with visible nervousness. The Galactic Council's member races had grown comfortable with their positions of power over younger species like humanity. They had rules, protocols, diplomatic procedures that had maintained order for thousands of years. What they hadn't expected was a species that would simply ignore those rules when survival was at stake. Marcus's next target was already identified. General Korthak of the Architect Collective, the synthetic intelligence responsible for calculating optimal strike patterns against human colonies. The Collective was a fascinating species, artificially created beings who had transcended their creators and built a civilization based on pure logic and mathematical precision. Korthak had determined that humanity's destruction should begin with surgical strikes against population centers, calculating the exact number of casualties needed to break human morale without triggering what his models labeled extinction protocol response. The AI was brilliant, but it had made one critical error. It assumed human behavior could be predicted using logical models. The transport ship Marcus boarded was a commercial freighter carrying agricultural products to the Collective's core worlds. He had spent 2 weeks establishing his cover identity as a specialist in Earth origin crops, complete with forged credentials and a carefully constructed background. The ship's manifest listed him as Dr. Samuel Torres, botanist and agricultural consultant. During the 3-day journey, Marcus studied his fellow passengers. The ship carried a mix of species, mostly traders and technicians doing business with the Collective. Conversations in the common areas revealed the growing paranoia among the galactic community. The systematic elimination of coalition leaders had created an atmosphere of suspicion that transcended species boundaries. "It's not natural," whispered a Vorthan merchant to his companion, a crystalline being whose translator rendered his words in Standard Galactic. "Humans don't coordinate like this. They're too individualistic, too chaotic. Someone is organizing them." His companion's form shifted slightly, indicating skepticism among the crystalline hegemony. "Perhaps we underestimated their capacity for revenge. Our intelligence suggested they would accept the ceasefire gratefully." "Intelligence was wrong," the Vorthan replied. "These aren't random acts of vengeance. Someone is targeting specific individuals with precision that suggests detailed knowledge of our operations." Marcus continued reading his agricultural journals, but absorbed every word. The aliens were beginning to understand that they were facing something unprecedented, a species that had responded to attempted genocide not with surrender or negotiation, but with their own carefully planned extermination campaign. When the ship docked at Collective Station Omega, Marcus disembarked with his equipment cases and agricultural samples. The station was a marvel of synthetic architecture, geometric perfection made manifest in metal and energy. Every angle was calculated for maximum efficiency, every system optimized for logical operation. The Architect Collective security screening was thorough, but predictable. They scanned for weapons, explosives, biological contaminants, and digital intrusion devices. What they didn't scan for was a carefully cultivated strain of earth fungus that had been modified to interact with specific synthetic neural pathways. Marcus's agricultural samples passed inspection easily. After all, he was exactly what his credentials claimed, a legitimate expert in earth origin crops. The fact that one of those crops had been weaponized using techniques learned during humanity's brief but intensive study of collective biotechnology was something their logical minds hadn't considered. As Marcus settled into his assigned quarters on the station, he reflected on how the war had changed. 6 months ago, humanity had been fighting for survival against superior technology and numbers. Now, they were fighting a different kind of war, one that played to human strengths rather than alien advantages. The galaxy was about to learn that humans didn't just hunt individuals. When threatened with extinction, they hunted entire concepts, dismantling the philosophical and strategic foundations their enemies relied upon. General Korthak's perfectly logical mind was about to encounter something that existed outside the boundaries of rational calculation. Human creativity applied to the art of war. Part 4 General Korthak's computational matrix failed during a routine strategic planning session, exactly 72 hours after Marcus had introduced his modified fungal spores into the station's atmospheric recycling system. The synthetic intelligence simply stopped mid-calculation, his quantum processors unable to resolve a logical paradox that had infected his neural pathways like a virus. Marcus watched the chaos unfold from the station's agricultural bay, where he had been conducting research on optimal growing conditions for Earth crops in artificial environments. Through the transparent, aluminum windows, he could see collective security forces moving with uncharacteristic disorder as their primary strategic coordinator became a collection of silent metal and crystalline components. The beauty of the attack was its untraceable nature. The fungal spores had been engineered to mimic natural decay, processes common in station atmospherics. When they interfaced with Korthak's synthetic biology, they had introduced a simple question that the AI's logical mind couldn't resolve. If the most efficient action is to eliminate inefficiency, and emotions are inefficient, but the elimination of all emotion-driven species would eliminate the diversity necessary for optimal problem solving, what is the most efficient course of action? Korthak had spent 37 minutes attempting to calculate an answer before his systems overloaded and shut down permanently. The Architect Collective's greatest strategic mind had been defeated not by superior firepower, but by a philosophical paradox delivered through modified mushroom spores. Marcus's communicator buzzed with updates from the Ghost Network. Elena's encrypted message contained a simple status report: coalition fractured. Void swimmers withdrawing from joint operations. Crystalline hegemony requesting separate negotiations. Architect Collective declaring logical pacifism. Vorthans increasingly isolated. The plan was working better than anyone had hoped. By systematically eliminating the key coordinators of the anti-human alliance, the Ghost Network had done more than just prevent genocide. They had demonstrated that humanity possessed something the galaxy's older species had lost: the ability to think beyond established parameters. A new message arrived, this one from someone Marcus didn't recognize. Ghost 7 to Ghost Prime. Vorthan Emperor has issued personal challenge to human leadership. Traditional combat. Winner determines fate of both species. Intelligence suggests this is trap. Emperor's bodyguard includes psionic specialists. Request guidance. Marcus considered the message while pretending to study plant growth rates. The Vorthans were a warrior culture, but they weren't stupid. If Emperor Vorth AK was offering single combat, it meant he believed he had an advantage that would guarantee victory. The psionics were the key, mental manipulation specialists who could influence an opponent's thoughts during battle. But the Emperor had made the same mistake as his subordinates. He was thinking like a civilized member of the galactic community, bound by rules and traditions that had maintained order for millennia. What he didn't understand was that humans had no investment in preserving that order. Marcus began composing his reply, but stopped when he noticed unusual movement outside the agricultural bay. Collective security forces were moving with renewed purpose, their geometric formations suggesting a coordinated search pattern. Someone had finally made the connection between the mysterious deaths and the presence of humans in restricted areas. He activated an emergency protocol, releasing the rest of his modified spores into the station's atmosphere. Within hours, every synthetic intelligence on the station would be grappling with logical paradoxes that would render them unable to function. It was a scorched earth approach that would cripple the collective's operations in this sector for months. As alarms began sounding throughout the station, Marcus made his way to the emergency escape pods. His cover identity would die with Dr. Samuel Torres, but Ghost Prime would continue the hunt elsewhere. Behind him, The agricultural bay's environmental systems began showing signs of failure as the spores interacted with the station's synthetic biology. The escape pod launched just as collective security forces breached the agricultural bay. Marcus watched the station shrink behind him as his pod's automated systems guided him toward a rendezvous with a human smuggling vessel that had been waiting in the system's outer asteroid field. During the 6-hour journey, Marcus composed his response to Ghost 7 and transmitted it through the network's encrypted channels. Accept the Emperor's challenge. Specify location: Earth orbit, aboard neutral vessel. Condition: combat must be broadcast galaxy-wide. Let them see what happens when someone threatens humanity's children. The message would reach every member of the Ghost Network within hours. More importantly, it would reach Human Command and the Galactic Council. Marcus was gambling that humanity's official leadership would be forced to acknowledge the challenge once it became public knowledge. The alternative, appearing to hide behind rogue agents, would be politically impossible. As the smuggling vessel's cargo bay opened to receive his escape pod, Marcus reflected on how far the situation had evolved. What had begun as a personal quest for revenge had become something larger, a demonstration that humanity belonged among the galaxy's major powers not because of technological advancement or diplomatic skill, but because they possessed something more fundamental: the willingness to risk everything for principles they believed in. The Galactic Council had declared a no-fire zone, expecting both sides to respect the boundaries of civilized warfare. What they hadn't anticipated was a species that would redefine those boundaries entirely. The hunt was no longer about eliminating individual targets. It was about establishing humanity's place in a galaxy that had underestimated the price of threatening Earth. Emperor Vorth AK wanted single combat to determine the fate of both species. Marcus smiled as he climbed out of the escape pod and greeted the smugglers who had risked their lives to extract him. The Emperor was about to learn that humans didn't just accept challenges. They transformed them into opportunities to demonstrate why some species were too dangerous to hunt. Part 5. The neutral vessel Concordance hung in Earth's orbit like a metal cathedral. Its diplomatic sections hastily converted into an arena for single combat that would determine the fate of two species. Representatives from every major galactic power filled the observation decks, their various forms creating a bizarre parliament of alien biology. The combat would be broadcast across the galaxy, the first time in recorded history that the fate of entire civilizations would be decided by individual warriors. Marcus stood in the human preparation chamber, checking his equipment one final time. The armor was standard military issue, the weapons primitive by galactic standards, a projectile rifle, a combat knife, and his grandfather's katana that had somehow survived 3 generations of warfare. Across the ship, Emperor Vorth AK would be performing similar preparations with gear that represented millennia of Vorthan military evolution. Admiral Morrison entered the chamber, his expression grim. "Chun, you realize this is insane. You're not even our official champion. You're technically a fugitive facing court-martial." Marcus attached the katana to his belt with practice movements, which is exactly why I'm the right choice. Vorth AK expects to face a champion bound by military protocol and galactic law. Instead, he gets someone who's already broken every rule that matters. The psionics won't work. Marcus tapped his temple, where a small device was barely visible beneath his skin. Dr. Elizabeth Warren's neural interference implant. She developed it after studying Vorthan prisoners. The Ghost Network has been testing it for weeks. Morrison stared at him. Warren was listed as killed in action 6 months ago. Warren was listed as missing, presumed dead. There's a difference. Marcus checked his rifle's ammunition load. Half the Ghost Network are people the galaxy thinks are dead. Turns out it's easier to hunt when your enemies believe you don't exist. The chamber's communications system activated, announcing 5 minutes until combat commenced. Through the viewport, Marcus could see the arena, a circular space 50 meters in diameter, with gravity plating that could be adjusted to simulate various planetary conditions. The Emperor had chosen standard Earth gravity, probably believing it would disadvantage the human fighter. Elena's voice crackled through his earpiece. Ghost Prime, network status report. 47 active operators across 18 sectors. Vorthan supply lines disrupted in 12 systems. Crystalline hegemony formally withdrawing from anti-human operations. Architect Collective has declared logical pacifism, and refuses further military coordination. Marcus nodded. The Ghost Network had grown from a handful of revenge-seeking soldiers into something resembling a parallel military organization. They operated without official sanction, funded by private donations and salvage equipment, united only by the understanding that some threats to humanity could not be handled through diplomatic channels. Understood. If I don't survive this, implement Protocol 7. Marcus, Protocol 7, Elena. The galaxy needs to understand that killing one of us just creates 10 more. The preparation chamber door opened, revealing a corridor lined with representatives from dozens of species. Marcus walked past them without acknowledging their presence, his attention focused on the arena ahead. In the observation galleries, he could see clusters of beings whose decisions affected the fates of billions: politicians, military commanders, trade consortium leaders, and the mysterious figures who actually controlled galactic policy from behind the scenes. The arena doors opened simultaneously, revealing two figures who represented fundamentally different approaches to warfare. Emperor Vorthicay stood 8 feet tall, his 4 arms carrying weapons that hummed with energy. His exoskeleton was polished to mirror brightness, inscribed with symbols that recorded every victory he had achieved in 60 years of combat. Psionic amplifiers integrated into his helmet allowed him to project mental interference patterns that could confuse or disorient most species. Marcus appeared smaller by comparison, carrying primitive weapons and wearing armor that looked crude next to the Emperor's technological marvels. What the observers couldn't see was the mental discipline that had been forged through months of hunting the galaxy's deadliest predators, a focus that had been sharpened beyond anything the Vorthan psionics could penetrate. The combat began without ceremony. Vorthicay immediately activated his psionic amplifiers, projecting waves of mental static designed to create confusion and fear in his opponent's mind. The technique had never failed against any species the Vorthans had encountered in their expansion across the galaxy. Marcus felt the psionic pressure like a whisper at the edge of his consciousness and smiled. The neural implant Elena had mentioned was only part of his defense. The real protection came from something the galaxy's older species had forgotten. Humans had evolved as persistence hunters, capable of maintaining single-minded focus across days or weeks of pursuit. That evolutionary trait, combined with months of meditation techniques learned during his hunt, made his mind a fortress that alien psionics could not breach. The rifle shot echoed through the arena like thunder. Vorthicay's energy shield absorbed the projectile's impact, but the Emperor stumbled slightly. The first time in his entire combat career that an opponent had remained functional under full psionic assault. What followed was not the elegant dance of blade and energy beam that galactic observers expected from ceremonial combat. Instead, they witnessed something that made the galaxy's military experts reevaluate every assumption they had made about human warfare capabilities. Marcus moved like a force of nature, adapting to each of the Emperor's attacks, while systematically dismantling the Vorthans' technological advantages. Energy shields failed against precisely placed rifle shots that created resonance frequencies in their projection matrices. Psionic amplifiers overloaded when Marcus used their own feedback loops against them. Advanced targeting systems became liabilities when facing an opponent who moved according to intuition rather than predictable tactical patterns. The end came when Vorthicay, his technological advantages stripped away, faced Marcus in hand-to-hand combat. The Emperor's 4 arms should have provided an insurmountable advantage, but human persistence hunting had evolved neural pathways capable of tracking complex movement patterns across extended periods. Marcus read the Emperor's attacks like a language he had been studying his entire life. The katana's blade found the gap between exoskeleton plates with surgical precision. Emperor Vorthicay collapsed to the arena floor, his yellow blood spreading across the metal plating as the galaxy watched in stunned silence. Marcus stood over the fallen Emperor, not in triumph, but in the grim satisfaction of a job completed. The formal terms of the combat meant that humanity had won the right to continue existing, but the real victory was already spreading across the galaxy's communication networks. Every species that had considered humans easy prey was now recalculating their risk assessments. Every military planner who had dismissed human capabilities was revising their strategic models. Most importantly, every would-be conqueror who had looked at Earth and Seeing opportunity was now seeing something else entirely, a species that had turned survival into an art form. As Marcus walked out of the arena, he knew the hunt was finally over. Not because all of humanity's enemies were dead, but because the galaxy now understood that some species were too dangerous to threaten. The Ghost Network would continue to operate, but their mission had evolved from revenge to something more sustainable, ensuring that the lesson learned here would never be forgotten. The no-fire zone had been declared, but Marcus Chun had already started something that would outlast any ceasefire. The understanding that humanity's place in the galaxy would be determined not by diplomatic protocols, but by the simple recognition that some hunts, once begun, could never truly end. He had been hunting Zethkar for 8 months across 17 star systems. The alien commander was brilliant, always staying one step ahead, always finding new ways to inflict maximum casualties on human forces. But Marcus was patient, and patience was something humans did better than most species in the galaxy. The Vorthans were a proud warrior race, standing nearly 8 feet tall, with chitinous exoskeletons that could deflect small arms fire. Their forearms made them formidable in combat, and their hive-mind tactical coordination had initially given them a significant advantage over human forces. But they had one weakness. Their commanders were individuals separate from the hive mind, capable of independent thought, but also capable of being isolated and eliminated. Marcus had learned everything about Zethkar over the months of pursuit. The commander's preference for elevated positions during planning sessions, his habit of removing his helmet in what he perceived as secure areas, and, most importantly, his arrogance. Zethkar believed humans were inferior beings, incapable of the patience required for a truly successful hunt. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of ozone and something like cinnamon from the alien vegetation. Marcus adjusted for the new wind pattern, his movements slow and deliberate. Below, Zethkar gestured to his subordinates, probably discussing the ceasefire and how it would affect their operations. Marcus's communication device buzzed with an incoming priority message. Without looking, he reached down and switched it off entirely. The galaxy might want peace, but peace was a luxury that came after justice. The families on New Geneva deserved better than a treaty signed by politicians who had never seen the aftermath of Vorthan interrogation techniques. Through his scope, Marcus watched as Zethkar moved to the edge of the clearing, studying something on a holographic display. The alien commander's bodyguards had relaxed slightly, probably receiving the same ceasefire orders that human forces had gotten. Their weapons were lowered, their attention divided. Marcus controlled his breathing, falling into the meditative state that had made him one of humanity's most effective snipers. The rifle in his hands was a custom piece, built specifically for long-range elimination of heavily armored targets. The ammunition was experimental, designed to penetrate Vorthan exoskeletons and deliver a payload of nanobots that would ensure the target didn't survive even if the initial shot wasn't immediately fatal. He thought about Sarah, his sister, who had been an architect on New Geneva. She had been designing schools and hospitals, buildings meant to nurture life and healing. Zethkar had ordered the colony burned to the ground after extracting everything of military value from the civilians. The survivors spoke of techniques that violated not just human morality, but the basic decency that most species maintained even in warfare. The crosshairs settled on the gap between Zethkar's helmet and chest armor. Marcus exhaled slowly, his finger applying gentle pressure to the trigger. The ceasefire might be in effect, but some hunts couldn't be called off once they had begun. The shot would end everything: his military career, possibly his life if he was caught, and certainly any chance of a peaceful resolution to this conflict. But as Marcus looked through the scope at the creature responsible for so much human suffering, he found he could live with those consequences.